right, my friends, I just wanted to showcase a bit of an experiment I'm conducting on number 61 in my orchid collection, my Miki Kobyashi Dee Potinara. Now, this was quite a sizable plant. It unpotted itself from semi-hydroponics because the root system slowly rotted away. It never properly established, and as you can see, imagine all four of those growing together. The plant was so sizable that without an established root system, it had nothing to stabilize it, so it fell straight out of the container. Now, when that happened, I left it out, bare root in open air for quite some time. I noticed that all of the pseudobulbs started to desiccate, so I knew I had to repot. So I went ahead and repotted it after splitting it into 4 plants. So this is all the same plant split into 4. Now I put one of them into full water culture. I put one of them into Sphagnum Moss. I put one of them into classic bark medium, and the last I put back into semi-hydroponics. And I think that the results thus far are pretty interesting. They've only been in this grow method for about 3.5 weeks, but let's go into the full water culture one first. Look at how quickly it is establishing a brand new root system. And if I take you in even closer, you'll see that even the established roots are beginning to branch. Now, I'm not sure if you can see it from your vantage point, but there is some mold growing on the old roots. From what I know about semi-hydroponics, this is totally to be expected. Some of these roots are not equipped to be in a full water culture grown environment. So those roots are liable to rot away, which is precisely what they're doing. But no need to panic because it is replacing it with a brand new root system. Now, if we move over to my Sphagnum Moss version, you'll see that this one is reestablishing quite nicely, especially in comparison to the semi-hydroponic version. Look how desiccated these bulbs are in comparison to these ones. This one replumped up quite quickly after being placed in Sphagnum Moss, and it's just beginning, but you can see it is establishing a root system in the container. Let me see if I can find the exact spot. But do you see right there, you can see the green root tips beginning to establish in this grow method. It appreciates the excess moisture, and it seems to be using it to really replump up and regain some momentum. Now, the same thing can be said for the bark version, and I actually think out of all of the divisions, this one seems to be the one that is the most vigorous. So this is just in classic bark medium. I put it right over a layer of leca in the bottom to facilitate proper drainage, but look how plump these bulbs got. They got super plump really quickly, they re-perked up, and the entire plant is standing very erect, very vertical. So it was super droopy like this one here in semi-hydroponics previously, and it just kind of corrected itself very, very quickly once it was placed into this grow method. Now, last, let's take a look at I probably should have started with this one, honestly. This is the semi-hydroponic one. Now, this one is not thriving, and it's peculiar because it seems to have the most legible, other than the water culture plant, the most legible root growth, but it does not seem to want to venture downwards into the medium. This is kind of the way it behaved for a very long time before I divided it and repotted it into all of these different methods. And you can tell it doesn't particularly like it, or it's not particularly effectively using its water reservoir, because look at how desiccated these pseudobulbs are. They are almost completely flat. It's pretty peculiar. So I said it once before and I'll say it again, this plant does not seem to like semi-hydroponics. I bet if and when these roots were to contact the water reservoir, it would be fine, but we're a long way out from that, so I don't think it's the most functional method to start. So that is where we are 3 weeks into this experiment, and I will check in again when there's something noteworthy to report. All right, so continuing with this experiment, the first video was filmed on June 1st. This video is being filmed on July 12th, so it's been just over a month. And I want you to see what has happened, particularly in the water culture container. The intensity and the vigor with which this has put out a root system is really impressive and is the leading grow method, in my opinion, at this time. Now let's take it and compare it to the Sphagnum Moss version. The Sphagnum Moss is also doing quite well. You can see that the bulbs have plumped up really nicely from where they were, and everything seems to be going well. It just doesn't seem quite as vigorous as the water culture container. The bark variation is doing quite well as well. I would say that it's probably neck and neck with the Sphagnum Moss version. The one thing I will say is this one is struggling with a bit of mold growth. So I'm treating that, but it does seem to be pretty undisturbed. I mean, look at this root system. It's doing quite well. Then lastly, the one that is not doing well is, once again, the one in semi-hydroponics. Look how desiccated the pseudobulbs are. Look how pruned up and wrinkly they are, particularly when you put it in comparison to the others. I mean, look at this versus that. It's night and day. So I do think for the sake of saving this one, I'm just gonna take it out of semi-hydro and put it into water culture, because as we can see, that has been a very, very effective method of coaxing out new roots. And then I will follow up one last time. And we are back for the final update on the Potinara experiment. The last update I filmed was on July 12th, and today is September 13th. So we are looking at this more than 2 months later, and I feel like I'm at a point where I can make some real informed assessments. So let's start with the full water culture version. And this one is, in my opinion, the winner of the entire experiment. Just get a load of this root system. It is using water so effectively. All of the bulbs on the plant have completely replumped, and get a load of this new growth. Do you see it? There's one coming in right there, and there is yet another one coming in right here. It has just been so happy with this grow method. It has put down the most expansive and noteworthy root system, and it's also honestly the easiest to care for. I fill it up to about where the canes or the bulbs begin and just let it set for about a week. Sometimes I forget it for about a week and a half to 2 weeks, and it does marvelously. Now we're gonna move to the Sphagnum Moss version, which also is probably a close runner-up. Look at these, look at the bulbs. They're all quite plump. They're all quite turgid. The leaves are so happy. And also, if I take you into the base, it worked that root system all the way down through the Sphagnum Moss and into the leca at the bottom. So you can see this plant is very well established. It's very happy in its container. So I do think that Sphagnum Moss is also a very suitable option, which kind of surprises me for a Cattleya type, which seems to like to dry out in between waterings. This one seems just fine in a Sphagnum Moss method. Moving on to the bark version. The bark version also did quite well. You can see that the bulbs all have reinflated. It has new growths. But what I think is the caveat to this one's success is when you come in closer, you can see that very prominent mold accumulation on the medium. It's not recovering from that mold. And sometimes it'll appear and then vanish when you're converting plants, but this one just really has been pretty persistent. So I do think that the plant is doing well, obviously, but I think it could be doing better. And last, I want to bring you back into the one that was originally semi-hydro. I made the decision on this last update to switch it to water culture just because it was about to die. And I just want to show you how quickly it bounced back. Do you remember how desiccated each of the bulbs were? They have all completely replumped up. You can see the vigorous new green root tips. This plant is recovering very quickly, and it's just really enjoying this environment of ambient humidity and regular access to water. So I think having gone through this entire process, specifically for this Potinara, and I'm talking about the Kobyashi Miki Dee, I do think that water culture is the strongest cultivation method at this time. You know, my feelings may change, who knows, but I just feel like all things considered, you know, whether that is the possibility for mold accumulation, whether that is the possibility for pests, I just think that the water culture method is so clean, it's so easy, it's so accessible, and it is such an effective rehabilitation method for plants that aren't doing well. So I think moving forward, I will grow my Potinaras like this. Now, having said that, this is once again specific to this plant. I'm not trying to generalize and say that I'll use water culture for every single plant, but the bottom line, the real objective of showing this experiment is to highlight the fact that we all have to experiment with different grow methodologies and systems because there is a healthy medium that exists between what the plant wants and what you are capable of giving it. And sometimes you have to renegotiate what that looks like. A lot of people get on me and they say, you know, why don't you just put that in perlite? Why don't you just put that in bark? You know that that's what that plant prefers. And yes, I recognize that, but it's not necessarily the most intuitive grow method for me, and I might not be very successful with it, even though it is commonly believed to be the best method. So I'm saying in order for you to succeed with your orchids, you have to find out what works best for you, and that is what this process has really documented. And with that, that's pretty much it. Thank you, as always, for choosing to spend your time with me. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, go ahead and leave it in the comments section below. Be sure to support one another in the comments section because I'm so seldom available to do so. Don't forget to click subscribe and have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye, guys.